My contract stipulated that termination would void all company-funded certifications. My overzealous new manager didn't know the firm's core operating license was linked to my name. When the CEO returned from his trip, he roared, "Who in God's name did we just let go?" The elevator lurched, a sickening jolt that sent my coffee splattering across the polished steel walls. I grabbed the railing, heart slamming against my ribs, as the lights flickered and the cabin plunged 3 floors in a scream of grinding metal. The emergency brake screeched, catching just before I became a headline in the New York Times. Chief Regulatory Officer crushed in freak accident at Apex Dynamics. My name is Emily Harper, I'm 45, and I don't believe in accidents. Not when I'm the one holding the keys to a $2 billion 0-cents biotech empire. The digital display blinked erratically, floor numbers flashing like a slot machine gone haywire. I pressed the emergency button, but the panel sparked, a faint whiff of burnt wiring curling into the air. Someone had tampered with this elevator. I didn't need a forensics team to tell me that, not after the email I'd received at 2 a.m., anonymous and untraceable. "Step back, Harper, or you won't see the next audit." I deleted it, chalked it up to a disgruntled vendor, but now, dangling in a steel coffin 50 stories above Manhattan, I regretted not saving the damn thing. My phone had no signal. Big surprise in a corporate tower with more security layers than Fort Knox. I forced myself to breathe, slow and steady, the way I did when facing down federal auditors with clipboards sharper than guillotines. The elevator groaned, a low, predatory sound, and I knew I had minutes, maybe seconds, before it decided whether to hold or drop. I pried open the control panel with my keys, hands steady despite the sweat beading on my forehead. Wires, circuits, a mess of tech I wasn't trained for. But I'd spent 15 years at Apex Dynamics learning how to outsmart systems, human and machine. I found the override switch, flipped it, and the cabin shuddered, inching upward to the nearest floor. The doors parted with a hiss, and I stumbled into the 48th floor lobby, gasping. My navy blazer stained with coffee and adrenaline. Security rushed over, all walkie-talkies and apologies, but I waved them off. "Get maintenance up here," I snapped, my voice sharper than I intended. "And don't touch that elevator until I say so." They nodded, wide-eyed, probably wondering why the chief regulatory officer was barking orders like a drill sergeant. I didn't care. I had an audit to prepare, 67 federal biotech licenses to protect, and a sinking feeling that someone wanted me dead before I could finish. By the time I reached my corner office, the Manhattan skyline glittering through floor-to-ceiling windows, I'd already decided to treat this as war. I locked the door, sank into my leather chair, and opened my laptop. The audit was for the FDA, a randomized beast that could shut down Apex's entire operation if a single license was out of place. Those licenses, 67 of them, each a bureaucratic masterpiece, were my domain, tied to my name, my biometric signature, my 15 years of blood and sweat. Without them, Apex couldn't ship a single vial of their cutting-edge gene therapies, couldn't sign a single contract, couldn't breathe. And someone, somewhere, wanted to cut off that oxygen. I pulled up my database, a digital fortress I'd built from scratch in 2010, back when Apex was a scrappy startup, and I was a 30-year-old idealist who thought compliance could change the world. Every license, every expiration date, every federal oversight body was tracked, cross-referenced, and encrypted. I exported a fresh copy, renamed it Q4 Budget Projections to throw off any snooping IT lackeys, and uploaded it to an offshore server in Iceland. If someone was coming for me, they wouldn't get the keys to the kingdom without a fight. The elevator incident wasn't the first warning. 2 weeks ago, my car brakes had failed on the West Side Highway, rain slicking the road as I swerved through traffic, narrowly avoiding a semi. The mechanic swore it was a cut line, not wear and tear. but I had no proof. Then there was the lab incident last month. A sealed chamber, where I'd been reviewing containment protocols, suddenly filled with a faint hiss of toxic gas. I'd overridden the lock just before my vision blurred, collapsing into the arms of a stunned technician. 3 near misses in a month? Either I was the unluckiest woman in New York, or someone was playing a very dangerous game. My phone buzzed, snapping me back to the present. It was a Slack notification from the company's general channel, pinned by Ethan Carter, the new consultant who'd swaggered into Apex like he owned the place. 32, Harvard MBA, tailored suits, and a smile that could sell sand in the Sahara. The CEO, Victor Langston, had introduced him last week as a disruptive innovator, corporate code for a hatchet man with a PowerPoint fed. The message read, "Join us at 10 a.m. for a live-streamed board meeting. Big news on Apex's future." Next Gen. The hashtag made me gag. So did the memory of Ethan's eyes locking onto mine during his first all-hands meeting, his voice dripping with condescension as he called me a legacy liability. He'd said it with a laugh, like it was a joke, but his gaze was predatory, a wolf sizing up a lamb. I wasn't a lamb. I was a lioness, and he was about to learn that. I glanced at the clock, 9:45 a.m., just enough time to change into a fresh blazer and make it to the boardroom. I didn't trust Ethan, not after his viral Slack rant last night, where he'd called my compliance protocols dinosaur tracks in a data-driven world. The junior analysts ate it up, flooding the thread with clapping emojis and memes of TR Rexes struggling with laptops. They didn't know those dinosaur tracks were the only thing keeping Apex from a federal shutdown. They didn't know I held the biometric keys to every license, every regulatory chain, every dollar in Apex's $2 billion 0 cents portfolio. But Ethan? He should have known better. His ignorance was either stupidity or strategy, and I wasn't betting on the former. The boardroom was a glass-walled cathedral on the 52nd floor, all sleek mahogany and panoramic views of the Hudson. I slipped in just as the live stream began, the room packed with executives, analysts, and a few shell-shocked interns clutching overpriced lattes. Ethan stood at the front, his navy suit crisp, his hair gelled into a Silicon Valley swoop. He looked like he'd Googled tech bro and followed the blueprint. Victor Langston, our CEO, sat to his right, his cruise tan glowing under the LED lights, his silk tie screaming old money. The rest of the C-suite flanked them, their faces a mix of curiosity and dread. "Good morning, Apex," Ethan's voice boomed, amplified by a wireless mic clipped to his lapel. "We're here to talk about the future, a leaner, faster, smarter Apex dynamics." His slide deck flashed onto the massive screen behind him, a neon nightmare of buzzwords. Quantum synergy matrix, decentralized innovation hubs, agile transformation ecosystem. It was like he'd swallowed a tech conference and vomited jargon. The interns nodded like they were witnessing the second coming of Elon Musk, but I saw the senior VPs exchange glances, their lips tight. They knew bullshit when they smelled it. Ethan clicked to the next slide, a sleek org chart with names in glowing boxes. My name, Emily Harper, was at the top of the regulatory branch, bolded in red. Then he clicked again and a red X slashed through it, replaced by TBD Agile Lead. A murmur rippled through the room, 200 pairs of eyes darting to me. I didn't flinch, didn't blink, just sat there with a smile sharp enough to cut glass. Ethan's gaze met mine, his smirk faltering for a split second before he recovered. "Some roles," he said, his voice smooth as snake oil, "are archaic, tied to legacy systems that slow us down. We appreciate historical contributions, Emily, but progress demands sacrifice." Sacrifice. The word hung in the air like a guillotine. Victor Langston shifted in his seat, his tan paling slightly, But he didn't interrupt. The room was silent, save for the hum of the projector and the faint tap of an intern's pen. I could have stood up, could have called Ethan out for his reckless ignorance, but I didn't. Not yet. Chess grandmasters don't tip their rooks in the opening move. I leaned back, my smile unwavering, and let him think he'd won the round. The meeting dragged on, Ethan droning about streamlining redundancies while I mentally reviewed my contract. Clause 9b, buried in the fine print, was my ace. In the event of involuntary termination, all company-funded regulatory certifications and licenses shall be nullified, with authority rescinded within 48 hours. It was a clause I'd insisted on a decade ago, when Apex was still small enough for me to negotiate directly with Victor. Back then, he'd laughed, called it paranoid, but signed anyway. Now it was a landmine, and Ethan was tap-dancing right over it. As the meeting ended, I slipped out, ignoring the pitying glances from colleagues who thought I'd been publicly gutted. They didn't know I'd already encrypted my database. Didn't know I'd spent the morning backing up every license to a server Ethan couldn't touch. They didn't know I'd survived an elevator crash, a car sabotage, a gas leak. They didn't know I was ready for war. Back in my office, I locked the door and pulled up Slack. Ethan's latest message was pinned, a glowing announcement about a cultural reset. All employees would re-interview for their roles, a chance to prove their alignment with Apex's vision. My position was marked for elimination, my responsibilities slated to be dumped on Chloe, a 22-year-old intern who thought CFR was a TikTok trend. I almost laughed. Chloe could barely spell OSHA, let alone navigate the FDA's labyrinthine regulations. Ethan's plan wasn't just reckless, it was suicidal. My phone buzzed again, this time with a calendar invite. Re-interview with Ethan Carter, 2 p.m. I accepted, not because I planned to beg for my job, but because I wanted to see how far he'd push this. I opened my contract again, flipping to Clause 9b and reread it, the words burning into my brain. If Ethan fired me, every license would vanish and Apex would be dead in the water. He didn't know that. He didn't know I'd built a shadow server in 2018, a backup system no one else could access. He didn't know I'd notarized a license relinquishment form last week, tucked away in a Brooklyn safe deposit box, ready to pull the plug if needed. At 1:55 p.m., I walked into the conference room, my heels clicking on the marble floor. Ethan was already there, slouched in a chair, his laptop open to a half-baked org chart. He barely looked up. "Emily," he said, his tone bored, "you've been here a while, right? 15 years?" "At 16, I corrected, my voice cool as a winter dawn. "Long enough to keep Apex compliant through 3 federal probes and a $2 billion 0 cents expansion." He shrugged, tapping his keyboard, probably typing fire fossil into his notes. "Institutional knowledge is great, but we're pivoting to agility. Your role's redundant." He clicked, and my name vanished from the chart, replaced by Chloe's. "We're delegating your licenses downstream. Chloe's got this." I smiled, the kind of smile you give a child who thinks they can outrun a tsunami. Chloe thinks CFR stands for cool filter reels. "You sure she's ready for the FDA?" His eyes narrowed, but he waved it off. "We'll train her. You don't need to worry about it anymore." He slid a folder across the table, a termination notice with my name on it. "Sign this, and we'll make it clean. No fuss." I didn't touch the folder. "I'll need a hard copy," I said, my voice steady. "And a notary." He blinked, thrown off, but recovered with a smirk. "It's all digital now, Emily. Progress." "Printed," I repeated, my stare unyielding. He sighed, called HR, and 4 minutes later I had a stapled copy in hand. I signed it, my pen slicing through the paper, and handed it back. Clause 9b was now active, a silent tripwire across 3 federal databases. In 48 hours, every license would be nullified, and Apex would be a ghost. I walked out, my head high, ignoring the whispers in the hallway. Ethan thought he'd won. Thought he'd streamlined me out of existence. He didn't know the elevator wasn't the only thing rigged to fall. He didn't know I'd spent 16 years weaving a regulatory noose, and he'd just slipped it around his own neck. That night, I sat in my Upper West Side apartment, a glass of bourbon in hand, watching the city lights flicker like a warning. My phone pinged with a confirmation email from the Federal Compliance Board. Your authority over licenses, BTX1 to BTX67, has been queued for revocation. Entities dependent on these licenses will be non-compliant in 48 hours unless reauthorized. I didn't reply. Didn't forward it. I just sipped my bourbon, the ice clinking softly, and waited for the chaos to begin. The next morning, Apex's compliance dashboard lit up like a war zone, red alerts flashing across every license. Procurement halted a $50 million 0-cent shipment, vendors citing inactive certifications. Ethan, ever the optimist, sent a company-wide email. Minor glitch, team. Will update the contact info by EOD. I almost felt bad for him. Almost. Then came the FDA audit. A surprise inspection scheduled for 10 a.m. I'd always known it was coming. Randomized, sure, but I'd tracked the patterns, color-coded the risks, cross-referenced them with vendor contracts. Without a licensed officer, the auditors couldn't even enter the secure labs. Apex was screwed, and Ethan was about to learn what happens when you fire the woman who holds the keys. As I sipped my coffee, another email arrived. This one from Sarah, a documentation manager who'd once left post-it doodles on my monitor. Emily, did you do this? Her voice cracked when I called her back. No, I said, my tone calm, my eyes on the skyline. You did. The bourbon tasted better that night. Apex was bleeding, and I was just getting started. The bourbon burned my throat, a slow fire that matched the chaos unfolding on my laptop screen. I sat in my Upper West Side apartment, the city's pulse thrumming through my window, and watched Apex dynamics implode in real time. My backdoor monitor, a shadow system I'd coded in 2018, hidden behind layers of encryption, showed their compliance dashboard bleeding red. 67 licenses, each one tied to my name, flickered like dying stars, their status flipping to inactive as Clause 9b worked its silent magic. I leaned back, the ice in my glass clinking, and allowed myself a single sharp smile. Ethan Carter thought he'd fired me. He didn't know he'd just detonated his own empire. It was 10 p.m., barely 12 hours since I'd signed the termination papers in that sterile conference room, my pen slicing through Ethan's smug victory, the memory of his smirk, his casual dismissal. It's all digital now, Emily. Still stung, but not as much as the satisfaction of watching his world unravel. My phone buzzed, a notification from an anonymous email I'd set up to mirror Apex's internal alert. $50, 0 cents, M spent halted. License BTX21 inactive. Contact certifying officer, Emily Harper. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. The noose was tightening, and Ethan was too busy preening to notice. But I wasn't celebrating yet. The elevator crash, the tampered brakes, the toxic gas leak, those weren't random. Someone wanted me gone. And Ethan, with his Harvard MBA and tech bro swagger, didn't strike me as the mastermind. He was a pawn, a shiny distraction for something bigger. The question was who, or what, was pulling his strings. I opened my encrypted employee wellness survey file, a decoy name for the fortress of data I'd built over 16 years. Every license, every federal regulation, every audit trail was there, cross-referenced and time-stamped. Somewhere in those 67 licenses was a clue to why someone was willing to kill me. I just had to find it before they tried again. The next morning, I woke to a city cloaked in fog, the kind that makes Manhattan feel like a noir film. My phone was already buzzing, a voicemail from Sarah, the documentation manager who'd called me last night, her voice trembling as she asked if I'd sabotaged Apex. I hadn't answered then, but now she was pleading. "Emily, it's a disaster. The FDA's here and we can't let them in. Please call me back." I deleted the message. Sarah was a good person, the kind who baked cookies for audit week, but she'd stood by while Ethan gutted me in front of 200 people. Loyalty has limits. I was halfway through my coffee when the first real blow landed. An email forwarded from a burner account I didn't recognize, with a subject line that stopped my heart. Harper, embezzlement allegations. The body was a leaked internal memo, supposedly from Apex's legal team, claiming I'd siphoned $3 million, 0 cents, from regulatory budgets over the past 5 years. The numbers were fabricated, the signatures forged, but the details were chillingly precise. Dates, account numbers, even a fake audit trail pointing to my personal bank account. Someone had spent months building this trap. And now it was live, CC'd to the FDA, SEC, and half the C-suite. My hands shook as I opened my banking app, clean, no mysterious deposits, no red flags. But the damage was done. If the regulators believed this, I wasn't just fired, I was facing prison. I forced myself to breathe, the way I did when a federal probe loomed, and started tracing the memo's metadata. It originated from an Apex server, time-stamped 3 a.m., just hours after my termination. Ethan's team, or someone higher, was playing dirty, and they weren't subtle about it. I was still digging when my phone rang, an unknown number with a 212 area code. Against my better judgment, I answered. "Restore the licenses, Harper," a distorted voice hissed, low and mechanical, like it was run through a modulator. "Do it by midnight, or you won't see morning." The line went dead before I could respond. My pulse spiked, but I didn't panic. I'd survived worse. Yesterday's elevator drop, last month's gas leak. I opened my panic app, a discreet tool I'd installed after the brake failure, and sent a silent alert to the NYPD, flagging the call's timestamp and number. If someone was hunting me, I wasn't going down quietly. By noon, Apex's collapse was accelerating. My backdoor monitor showed their dashboard drowning in red alerts, every license flagged as orphaned. A junior analyst, Mia, had tried to explain the crisis in a company-wide Slack thread. Registration takes 8-12 weeks. Emily was the only officer with federal authority. Ethan's response, pinned for all to see, was pure denial. "We'll update the contact info. Stay calm." I could almost hear his gelled hair wilting. He didn't know that contact info meant biometric signatures, federal clearances, and a regulatory board that moves slower than a glacier. He didn't know I'd designed the system to lock tighter than a bank vault if my credentials were revoked. Then came the FDA audit, a randomized inspection I'd always planned for, my spreadsheets color-coded to the moon. Without a licensed officer, me, the auditors couldn't enter Apex's secure labs. The front desk's panicked email hit my Mirror account at 10:04 a.m. Inspectors demanding certifying officer. No one's authorized. By 10:22, the auditors were gone, leaving a rejection notice that would trigger automated fines and contract breaches. Apex's $2 billion 0 cents portfolio was now a house of cards, and Ethan was still shuffling the deck. I should have felt triumphant, sipping my coffee in sweatpants while Apex burned. But the embezzlement memo and the threatening call had shifted the game. This wasn't just about Ethan's ego or a corporate misstep. Someone wanted me erased, and they were willing to frame me, kill me, or both. I opened my notarized license relinquishment form, scanned from the Brooklyn office last week, and stared at the unsigned signature line. It was my nuclear option, a legal kill switch that would finalize the license revocations if I signed. I'd kept it unsigned, a safety valve, but now I wondered if I'd need to pull the trigger. The day took a darker turn at 3 p.m. I'd stepped out for air, needing to clear my head after the threatening call. The Upper West Side was bustling, tourists snapping photos of brownstones. But I felt eyes on me. A man in a black hoodie trailed me from Riverside Park, his pace matching mine, his face obscured. I quickened my steps, weaving through a crowd near 72nd Street. But he stayed close, his hand slipping into his pocket. My panic app was still active, and I hit the alert button, sending my location to the NYPD. I ducked into a crowded deli, heart pounding, and watched him linger outside, his gaze locked on the glass. A patrol car rolled by, sirens blaring, and he vanished into the throng. I didn't breathe until I was back in my apartment, doors triple locked, bourbon in hand. The stalker wasn't random. Neither was the lab centrifuge explosion 3 days ago, a near miss that had left me shaken but unharmed. I'd been calibrating equipment in Apex's high-security lab when the machine roared to life, spinning at lethal speed before shattering in a hail of metal. I'd dove behind a containment unit, shards missing me by inches. The techs called it a malfunction, but I'd seen the tampered control panel, the override code entered remotely. Someone wanted me dead, and they were getting bolder. By evening, Apex's internal emails were a war zone, blind copied to my Mirror account by a sympathetic colleague. Ethan's latest memo to the board was a masterclass in delusion. Legacy processes under review. Redundant certifications identified. Redundant? My biometric signatures were the only thing keeping Apex legal. He'd pushed for my immediate exit, oblivious to Clause 9b, and now the board was waking up. A reply from legal, marked urgent, hinted at panic. Clause 9b activated upon termination. All licenses tied to Harper nullified. Ethan's response, sent at 6:17 p.m., was a single word: impossible. I was pouring a second bourbon when Sarah called again, her voice raw. Emily, it's over. The FDA's fining us $100 million, 0 cents, and clients are pulling out. Did you do this? I stirred my drink, the ice clinking like a metronome. You pressed the button, I said, my tone calm, my words a mirror of last night's reply. She hung up, and I felt a pang, not guilt, but something close. Sarah hadn't fired me, hadn't framed me, but she'd stood in Ethan's shadow, silent. Choices have consequences. The next blow came at midnight, a subpoena email from the SEC summoning me to testify in a probe into Apex's compliance failures. The accusations were brutal: fraud, negligence, potential embezzlement. If I lied, I'd face perjury. If I told the truth, I'd expose Apex's collapse and maybe my own role in triggering it. I saved the email, my mind racing. The embezzlement memo, the threatening call, the stalker, they were connected, a web tightening around me. But who was the spider? I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I dug into my wellness survey file, searching for anomalies. One license, BTX67, stood out. It wasn't tied to Apex's main gene therapies, but to a classified project, codenamed Orion, with restricted access even I couldn't crack. The approval trail led to a shell company in the Caymans, a red flag I'd flagged years ago but never pursued. Was Orion the reason someone wanted me dead? I encrypted the file again, my fingers trembling. and wondered if my shadow server was safe, or if Apex's board already knew about it. The morning brought a new shock. Victor Langston, Apex's CEO, was back from his Dubai retreat, his yacht-tanned face twisted with rage. My Mirror account caught his email to the C-suite, sent at 7:02 a.m. Who authorized Harper's termination? Her name's on every license. Fix this, now. Ethan's reply was a stammering mess, blaming staffing overlaps and promising to reassign credentials. Victor's response was a single line. You're done. By 9 a.m., Ethan was demoted to process coordinator, banished to a cubicle with a flickering monitor, his standing desk replaced with a wobbly chair. I should have laughed, but the subpoena and the stalker kept my joy in check. Then came Apex's desperate offer, emailed at noon. A $500,000 0-cents consulting contract, 6 months, full silence required. No apology, just corporate groveling dressed in legalese. We recognize your critical contributions, Emily. Let's rebuild together. I read it twice, my bourbon glass empty, and drafted a reply. Victor, I don't return to burning buildings, especially ones I was thrown into. Attached, Clause 9B, License Revocation Notice, and your dashboard screenshot. My name grayed out, irreplaceable. I hit send, my heart steady, and watched the city lights flicker like a storm on the horizon. Apex's collapse accelerated. Fines hit $250 million 0 cents, clients defected, and the stock plummeted 40%. My Mirror account buzzed with panic. Vendors suing. Bankruptcy rumors. Gala canceled. Ethan was fired via a 90-second Zoom call. His LinkedIn now listing independent consultant, a corporate obituary. Meanwhile, I'd accepted an offer from Helix Biocore, VP of Regulatory Strategy, with a $1 billion 0 cents contract portfolio. Apex's top clients, Omega Med, Vayarch, followed me, citing my unmatched compliance expertise. My new office had glass walls, an espresso machine, and a chair that didn't squeak. I was a titan, my reputation forged in Apex's ashes. But the questions lingered, sharp as knives. Who tampered with the centrifuge? The elevator? My car? Was Ethan a pawn, or did he know more? What was in the Orionic file, locked behind my own encryption? Would Apex find my shadow server, or was it already compromised? And the thug outside my apartment? Was he hired by the board, or someone higher? I pinned a sticky note to my new monitor, 5 words in steady block letters. I was the license. A reminder, a warning, a promise. As I sipped my coffee, Colombian black with a pinch of triumph, I knew this wasn't over. Apex was ruined, but the spider was still out there, spinning its web. I'd survived their traps, outsmarted their schemes, and built a new castle. But the game was bigger than I'd thought, and I was ready to play.